Welcome back to Frankie Sparks and the Lucky Charm, Chapter 3, Science to the Rescue. All day long, Frankie's brain spun. She felt like she had a washing machine in her head, stirring her thoughts back and forth and round and round. If leprechauns were real, she reasoned, surely someone would have seen one. Surely someone would have caught one by now. On the other hand, there were lots of things that people hadn't understood at first. And then science figured them out, like the giant squid. When people first saw them in the ocean, people thought they were sea monsters or maybe mermen. Later, scientists identified them by their remains as real animals, but it wasn't until decades later that someone got a picture of one. Maybe leprechauns were just as hard to find as giant squid. Frankie thought about it, and she ate her applesauce at lunch. She thought about it while Mrs. Cupid read aloud. She thought about it while they were supposed to be working on their math facts. By the end of the day, her brain was exhausted. She took the bus to her father's nursery. He had the place decorated for St. Patrick's Day with pots of clover out front and a cutout of a leprechaun in the window. On his message board, he'd slip in the letters to say, "Capture the luck of the Irish, get your green today." While her father helped a customer pick out the best kind of roses for her garden, Frankie perched on the stool behind the counter. She was helping her dad by organizing seed packets. Her dad had once told her that seeds had been at the start of figuring out genetics, how parents pass along traits like hair color to their kids. Frankie guessed that was genetics was another thing that people had wondered about until a scientist had stepped in and figured it out. A light bulb went off in her head. The light bulb feeling was much more common for Frankie, as much more pleasant than washing machine brain. She was an inventor, which was kind of like a scientist. She had a question in front of her, and she needed to use science to find the answer. She took out a piece of paper. "Do leprechauns exist?" she wrote. "Prove or disprove." Then she stared at the paper. She stared at it some more. Maybe this wasn't going to be so easy after all. Her dad came back to the counter and saw her staring at the paper. "Do leprechauns exist?" He read over her shoulder. "That's an age-old question." "I'm going to answer it," Frankie said, "I think." "What's your hypothesis?" he asked. Frankie nodded. A hypothesis was like a prediction for how you thought an experiment would turn out. Your educated guess about how things would work before you investigated them. "My hypothesis is that they don't exist," Frankie said. "I see," he said. "And how do you plan to test your hypothesis?" Frankie slumped. That was her exact problem. She didn't know how to test her hypothesis. There were lots of ways to prove something did exist, but how do you prove that something didn't exist? "Ah, I see," her dad said. "Listen, I've known you for a long time." Frankie put her chin on the counter but lifted her head to look at her dad. "My whole life practically," she said. "Your whole life exactly," he responded. "And here's what I know about you. When you have a problem, you figure it out. This one might seem like a tough challenge, but I have faith in you." He reached out and tousled her curls. "Thanks, Dad," she said. He picked up a small potted fern. "Just don't count on a trip to Ireland, okay?" he said with a laugh before making his way out into the aisles of the greenhouse. Frankie knew that she couldn't go all the way to Ireland, but her dad had given her a good idea. She should write down everything she knew about leprechauns. She took her little red inventing and ideas notebook out of her backpack. She started her list with where leprechauns live. "They come from Ireland. They like green places, lots of trees and grass and stuff." Frankie looked around. There weren't many places that had more green than her dad's nursery, and she had never in her life seen any evidence of a leprechaun there. That seemed like proof that they didn't exist. Then again, Maya's lawn was greener than just about any other lawn that Frankie had ever seen. So if leprechauns did exist, Maya's backyard would be a place that they'd like. Frankie kept writing. Most of the ideas she wrote down came from the book that Miss Appleton had read, but others came from TV shows or other stories she had heard. She added idea after idea until she almost the whole page was filled up. They are small, they wear green, they like gold, they are tricky, they are smart, most have beards, job fixing shoes, hobby hiding gold at the end of the rainbow. When she was done, she looked at her notes. Pretty impressive. She wasn't sure if she had spelled all the words correctly, and as we could see, she didn't. But that was okay. The problem was she wasn't any closer to figuring out how to prove that leprechauns didn't exist. Proving they did exist would be easy. She would just need to catch one. But was she still stuck with the same question? How do you prove that something doesn't exist? And then it hit her. If you can prove a leprechaun existed by catching one, then you proved one didn't exist by not catching one. She had to make a trap, not just a regular leprechaun trap. She had to make the most amazing leprechaun trap ever. And when that amazing, stupendous, magnificent leprechaun trap didn't catch a single leprechaun, that would prove they were not real. Tune in next time to Chapter 4, The Perfect Trap.